All right, guys, welcome back to the Pocket Mads channel. It's Maddie here. Today, we're going to talk about a bunch of really unique and cool deck lists that did well recently in online tournaments, but aren't necessarily considered top-tier meta decks. It's a brand new season, so we've got some interesting stuff to highlight today, and I do think that the metagame right now will be completely different than it is a week from now. So having sort of these midweek videos is a great way to highlight these players, these deck lists, and these tournaments that go on throughout the week. That, of course, are not our own tournament that we do on the weekend, but also update you guys on, what's kind of progressing as the season kind of rapidly develops. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, don't forget to register for PMPT number 30, our 30th tournament series is going to be, or 30th tournament of our tournament series is going to be this Saturday at noontime. Link to register down in the description below. Okay, so that's it. I don't think we got anything else to cover, but let's get right into it. We got a handful of different decks here, and, some of these might not be the best decks in the game, but some of these might be the next best deck to come to the metagame. We really don't know, which is why we highlight them in this video series. The first one, at the Umbreon 99 and Fraps Drinker Clash $20, is going to be Skylar's deck, and I believe he got first place or really close. He got top 4. Playing Lucario, Mega Lucario that is, but kind of a different version of Mega Lucario. I know that our friend Sekaru's been talking about this for quite some time, and I do think that Mega Lucario has a lot of room for development. This player went 10-1-2 at this tournament, a fairly large tournament that is, yeah, I think it's a really nice deck. Let's take a look. And this is going to be a very simple version of Mega Lucario with just Hitmontop out here. Double Research, double Copycat, double X Speed, double Rocky Helmet, and then, yeah, 2 of the Piercing Spin Hitmontop. And this is a really good card. This is effectively, kind of the same card as like Pheromosa. It's got, I think, 10 more HP, has 1 more in its retreat cost. But, when we have Hitmontop in the active, what we want to do is just keep it there and attack turn after turn after turn. And we want to attach the Rocky Helmet to it and just deal a lot of damage. And then hopefully set up for a Mega Lucario late in the game. This is a very simple Lucario deck, but I think that, when we take a look at Mega Lucario, as well as most of the strongest Pokemon in the game, they really do benefit from being incredibly simple. This Mega Lucario deck reminds me very much so of Mega Blaziken in the way that people are playing it currently right now. Mega Blaziken, simply, you play a 2-2 Torchic Blaziken lineup with 2 Rare Candy, and then you just play 2 Cast Form with the Stadium in there, and, Flame Patches and whatnot. So I really think that this is this should be like the standard or the baseline way that we play Mega Lucario, because I do think Hitmontop is just that best leadoff option right now when it comes to fighting type Pokemon. And this is going to be a very consistent deck, right? Because double X Speed, double Research, double Copycat. So lots of 2-ofs from a consistency standpoint. And realistically, if we do lead with Riolu, we should be able to X Speed into Hitmontop and just start attacking rapidly. This is definitely a deck that would rather go second. Most decks would rather go second. There are some exceptions to that. And I think Rocky Helmet, along with Antiquity and Korrina with Hitmontop in the active, is just going to put a ton of damage on the board. And it should allow you to kind of, build up your Mega Lucario, draw some cards, get your Korrina, your Cyrus in hand for your win condition, and then just win the game outright. And again, there's nothing wrong with playing a very simplistic version of a deck list if it is, in fact, a really good way to play it. I know that's the Bad Dreams Igglybuff Darkrai combo, very prominent in Lucario right now. It is the most common, the most popular way that people are playing Lucario, and that is just because Igglybuff and Darkrai is fundamentally an incredibly strong combination, and you're likely going to see it very much so throughout the rest of this season. But keep in mind, Hitmontop Lucario is nice because it's pure fighting, and it's going to be, I think, a lot more consistent and straightforward than an Igglybuff Darkrai combo is going to be, even though it might not be as strong on paper. This, to me, could easily be like the default, Lucario deck by the end of the season. The thing you have to keep in mind about the sleep stuff is while it does have a strength, which is going first, and the fact that you can deal damage and attack going first, there's RNG involved with coin flips, but there's a lot of counterplay to the sleep stuff. Ogerpon is becoming very popular. PCLs are still seeing play. In fact, there's one in this deck as well, mostly for, the sleep matchup. So there's a lot of counterplay to sleep. And in a deck like this, there's really no way to counter it other than just sort of, beating it straight up. And I think that's a really big upside to this deck list. A lot of people playing this Lucario version. I know, like I said, Sekaru's been talking about this a lot. He's had a lot of upside with this, and I do think that it's probably going to be a really significant option. So I know we put fighting Lucario on B tier on our tier list, but if this is the list that I think becomes the standardized fighting package Lucario deck, then it's probably going to end up being much higher than a B tier deck list in the future. So I wanted to highlight this because it did do very well at this tournament, even though this might not be like a surprising deck. Like, this might be very common, but I just wanted to talk about it outright because I do think it's something that deserves to be talked about a little bit more. So shout out, by the way, to Siler from Croatia, Siler33, and shout out to Umbreon and Fraps Drinkers Tournament. Next up at the Breakfast Cup pop-up is going to be Portland Poliwags from Slovenia, and he was playing Giratina Darkrai. So again, another deck that we're familiar with. We did highlight this somewhat recently, but I did just want to mention that some people are still playing Giratina Darkrai, and it's doing well. So again, I wanted to get the decks that people probably were already familiar with out of the way at the beginning of this video. You guys can always skip ahead. I put timestamps, of course, but this is sort of, you know, the newer rendition of Giratina Darkrai. This is the updated version. It has been doing well. If we go back, this player went 7-2-2, but I believe there was another player right next to him in the standings. So, you know, again, one of the more consistent decks throughout this entire season, and I actually think it's probably a top 10, top 15 deck in the game right now. So Giratina Darkrai, I don't know if it's ever going to be as played as it was, you know, in the past. We just have a lot of really strong cards in the metagame right now, but certainly not a deck to be slept on. A lot of one-ofs in this deck, but I think Field Blower is a nice inclusion here, and I did just want to talk about it because people are still playing it, and it's still doing well. On that same note, I just wanted to highlight Aura Veru from Chile playing Zoroark because they won this tournament, this Umbreon Fraps Drinkers Clash, so they got first place. It beat a lot of Lucarios throughout this tournament. This was an incredible run. If you take a look, he beat Suicune, but beat 4 Lucario decks as well as Magnezone in Top Cut. Beat basically every meta deck available in the metagame. So a first place finish. I just want to highlight this because, again, I am on the Zoroark train. I know these are decks that we've already talked about, but I just wanted to give you an update as to what's happening throughout this week. We got some more different, unique decks later in the video. But yeah, first place finish for Zoroark at a very large tournament. A significant matchup here. We do see Hiking Trail in this deck list, which is pretty cool. But yeah, we're gonna see Absol, Darkrai, Bombardier, pretty standard list. This is Lucky Ice Pop, so like that's the thing about these dark type decks, and especially I think when you're playing Mega Absol, is that Lucky Ice Pop really is a defining characteristic, because if you get lucky on those Ice Pops with Mega Absol, you can get another attack off, and that's just gonna be the difference between you winning or losing the game. But at this point, I feel very strongly that Zoroark might in fact be the better dark type deck option right now, as opposed to Hydreigon. So it's just something to keep our eye on. I just wanted to highlight it that it did win a tournament recently, and it's certainly going to be, you know, very top tier contending deck moving forward. Something that I think could knock Hydreigon off of its pedestal, which, you know, again, you know, Sceptile might already be doing that. This is a deck list that maybe doesn't love the Sceptile matchup, but certainly a very, very strong deck. So I wanted to highlight it and let you guys know that this player here, Aura Veru from Chile, got first place, had a really, really great performance with Zoroark. So I didn't want this to like fall to the wayside. I just wanted to highlight you guys on this deck performing quite well. Next up is going to be a really interesting deck that went 6-3. This is Flipsicle from India at this Umbreon Fraps Drinkers Clash tournament, and it's going to be Armorouge. So, you know, shout out to Armorouge, because this is certainly not a bad Pokemon by any stretch of the imagination. I think it really fell to the wayside, you know, in favor. Most people kind of playing things like Blaziken, like Charizard, some of these like bigger mega fire type Pokemon, but Armorouge is a very underrated Pokemon, but it takes 30 less damage from attacks, which means that you're just not getting KO'd. Like, that's simply what this means by the vast majority of Pokemon, and we are still hitting things like Sceptile for weakness. So Armorouge, 3 energy does 120. You discard an energy from this Pokemon, but as we know, fire type decks get access to things like Flame Patch. So a really, really decent deck list, and a very similar deck to what you might see somebody playing with Mega Blaziken. And I honestly do think that Armorouge might in fact be kind of like a better option on paper than Blaziken is in this current metagame. Not a 3-prize Pokemon, but effectively is also not getting 1-hit KO'd. So when you think about the breakpoints in the metagame, you think about it like this. Like, if you're going to be playing, you know, a deck like this, or playing like a fire type deck, as opposed to Blaziken, if they're both not getting 1-hit KO'd, but they're both going to get 2-hit KO'd, then what's really the difference? I know Blaziken does more damage than Armorouge, so you might in general be like, why would I play Armorouge instead of Blaziken? But again, it did well. It did well at the tournament. So kind of maybe a niche option here. We're playing 2 Cast Form, Sunny Form, and then we actually have Chi-Yu in this deck list, which I also think is sort of underrated as kind of a mid-tier, or sorry, like a mid-game option in terms of like damage output. Because again, we can recycle energy with Flame Patch. Like, there's nothing saying that we can't do that pretty easily in fire type decks. So what's cool about Chi-Yu is that it's sort of one of those revenge attackers. So if one of your Pokemon got KO'd on the previous turn, you know, Chi-Yu can come in for 2 energies, hits for 100, and then it doesn't have a lot of HP. It'll probably get KO'd, but it's putting 100 damage on the board. So this is a Pokemon that I think is honestly very underrated in fire type decks. And the way that it would go typically is that you'd lead off with Cast Form or Heatmore, hopefully. You know, you'll deal the damage, do what you're gonna do. Once those Pokemon go down, you then go into Chi-Yu, hit for 100, and then your opponent then at the end of the battle has to go through finally, you know, your EX Pokemon that you would finish games with. In this case, it would be Armorouge. So again, I just wanted to highlight this because again, I don't really know if there's like much of a reason to be playing Armorouge over things like Charizard X or Blaziken, but at the end of the day, it's not a bad Pokemon whatsoever, and I just found that to be really interesting. A lot of you know, Ogerpon and stuff running around, so effectively you deal the same amount of damage as Blaziken, and honestly, the ability can be really clutch. So we oftentimes look at the metagame as, hey, like, can I live one hit and then 2-hit KO? Like, that's sort of the process. But there are some decks that just don't hit for like a ton of damage, and like Armorouge, because it takes -30 from attacks, anything in the metagame that doesn't deal like a lot of damage in one attack just isn't ever going to deal any damage to Armorouge, right? So it's a Pokemon that some decks are going to have a really difficult time getting around. You know, something like a Zoroark, instead of hitting for 90, it's hitting for 60, which means that they can't even 2-hit KO us, which is a really big deal, right? So for any of those mid-range, you know, attacking options or those tempo attackers, things like Manectric is a good example, those are Pokemon that are going to struggle a lot more into Armorouge. And again, if you're going to be hitting, you know, into things like Blaziken or I don't even know what else it does, like Hydreigon, those are things that are going to 2-hit KO you anyway. And like I said, in Blaziken, you're going to get 2-hit KO'd regardless. So it's just an interesting note. It's just an interesting thing to note. Somebody playing Armorouge, Flipsicle, and doing quite well. So, you know, just sort of illustrating that I think the Fire-type package in general right now is not terrible, but we don't necessarily have, you know, much of a reason to be playing Blaziken over like Armorouge. You know what I mean? Like, they all kind of do the same thing. So kind of a cool example. Did just want to highlight that. Shout out to him. Next up is going to be Palmy from Germany, and this is Vaporeon EX. I haven't done my due diligence and highlighted much Vaporeon so far this season. Everybody's had pretty strong opinions about Vaporeon and how they should be playing it, but this is really the only Vaporeon deck in recent, you know, in the last few days where somebody's placed somewhat well playing Vaporeon EX. So I just wanted to highlight it. This is going to be Vaporeon and Inteleon, and I'm a big fan of Inteleon. It's one of my favorite Pokemon from the new set. Again, 6-3 at this tournament here. Let's take a look at the deck list. And again, guys, if you have a better Vaporeon deck, just comment it down below. Let me know what you're playing with Vaporeon. But all I have available for you guys are the decks that have placed at tournaments. So this is sort of the example, at least right now. But again, I really do love Inteleon. Some interesting synergy between Frozen Flow and then, of course, all of the Swift Shot damage. You know, the Inteleon line with Swift Shot is going to deal a little bit more damage, you know, when you combine it with Vaporeon's 80 damage attack. So it does add up, which is always pretty fun. I just really like Inteleon, but what's cool with Vaporeon is you can swap your opponent out of the active, which means that in some scenarios, being able to like Sabrina every turn and have all of this extra damage come out from the bench can be pretty valuable. The only downside to this deck list is that, you know, there's a lot of evolution Pokemon, which is why here we're kind of forced to play double research, double copycat, and a May into the deck list, which doesn't leave a whole lot of space for other things. But we are playing one Parasol Lady, and again, you would like to play more than one. Vaporeon has 160 HP, which is pretty nice. Again, you're not going to get one hit KO'd by virtually anything common in the metagame right now, other than things like Lucario, you know what I mean? But like most things in the game are not going to hit for 160 or plus. And again, even Lucario won't. And so a Giant Cape brings you to 180, and then even then, you know, you're going to struggle. One thing that's very underrated with Inteleon that I don't think people necessarily realize is that it has 150 HP. So like, again, most of the time, like Lucario's never going to be able to hit you for more than 140 because you're not an EX Pokemon, unless, of course, they have play like Giovanni or whatever. Or Rocky Helmets, which they do sometimes. But Inteleon is really, has a ton of HP, and the combo of actually being able to evolve your Inteleon that turn and then attack with it, that's 100 damage. So like at the end of the game, or even like in the mid game, Inteleon can just kind of come out and hit you for 100. It's got a lot more reach than you might think. I still think the stuff with Inteleon is very underrated. I think unfortunately for Inteleon, the prize mathing can be a little bit strange, and then things like Suicune are struggling actively in the metagame right now, which means Inteleon doesn't have like a lot of great partners. Maybe that's a good thing for the metagame, but I honestly really think people are kind of sleeping on Inteleon. So I think it's something that we should kind of consider a little bit more so. And again, I think Vaporeon is a totally fine card. I don't think this is a bad card by any stretch of the imagination. It's just, again, one of those things where it's like, you know, like what is the real reason to play Vaporeon in the metagame? Like, what is it countering? I don't really think there's anything super significant in the metagame that it counters, say, other than maybe Blaziken, which again is falling off pretty rapidly. And it doesn't have like phenomenal matchups into like a lot of other things. So it's a very interesting card, definitely not a bad card. I know a lot of people really like the idea of Vaporeon, and quite frankly, we've waited a very long time to get Vaporeon EX. I think it's the last evolution to get an EX card, which is crazy. And it's definitely not a bad card. So, you know, it's just one of those things. It's like, you know, at the end of the day, is this really like is this what we're playing? Like, is this what you're going to choose to play? I think on the tier list, I don't even know if we put Vaporeon on the tier list because people just aren't really playing it, which, you know, is kind of disappointing, I'm sure, to some people. But that's what this video series is all about on Wednesdays, is highlighting, you know, decks that just don't really see enough love. Maybe there's a reason for that. But this has Vaporeon and Inteleon, 2 new water type Pokemon that I love. So definitely a pretty interesting deck. And maybe they did intend you to play Vaporeon and Inteleon together. It's just almost like, what are we, like, what problems in the metagame are we solving by doing that? You know what I mean? It is sort of like definitely not a bad deck, but it's also like, okay, you know, like what I guess maybe if Fire was just all over the place, this would feel like a much better deck list, but I just don't really think Fire is that significant right now. Anyway, shout out to them. Shout out to Palmy and his Vaporeon deck. Next up, Ishan from India. First place at the only Fraps pop-up here. A first place Meowscarada finish just a few days ago. Not something I would have had on my bingo card for this season, but really dominant performances across the board. Beat Zoroark 3 times. Went 2-1 into Lucario, beat Altaria, beat Blaziken, and then beat double Sceptile. So an incredible run for this Meowscarada deck, 10-1 record. Meowscarada becoming one of the more underrated Pokemon in the entire game. And honestly, guys, I think another deck that's been pretty heavily buffed by the fact that you can incorporate Teal Mask Ogerpon in it pretty seamlessly. Dark decks being somewhat common in the metagame right now, and of course, having access to the new Fragrant Forest. So this is a deck list that I think a lot of people should be trying a little bit more so. I think Meowscarada is one of the more gratifying decks to play in all of Pokemon Pocket. The gameplay loop is interesting. It's definitely a higher skill gap deck list, and it doesn't feel like really cheesy, you know what I mean? Yes, it's a rare candy deck, but you have a lot of consistency in here because of Fragrant Forest, and of course we have Copycat in the game. So as you see, we're playing double Erica and Lucky Ice Pop with Leaf Cape. So the whole idea here is definitely to be a bit of a sustain deck, but an incredibly flexible sustain deck that can deal damage in ways that other decks just aren't really able to do. And we do have the non-EX Meowscarada in here if we wanted to hit for 130 damage, which this damage holds up. This Meowscarada is a very old card, the Fighting Claws Meowscarada, but 130 is 130, and I don't care who you are, that's a decent amount of damage even in, you know, what are we in, like May of 2026. So it's kind of crazy. The power creep in Pokemon Pocket, certainly here, but not from a damage perspective, as you guys might think it kind of is, right? I mean, we had Charizard, from day one, we had Charizard hitting for 200 damage. Like, so think about that. Or is it 180? I think it's like 180. But anyway, Meowscarada EX, very underrated, honestly. And it performed somewhat well at our tournament. I think we had a day 2 Meowscarada appearance at PMPT 29. It's something that I'm going to play a little bit more myself, something I want to test a bit more. Maybe something that was a bit more common or kind of a better choice, maybe when Hydreigon was, you know, more popular, or dark type decks were more popular. But you can't deny the fact that this particular run in general, and I know, you know, again, things happen, like, you know, some people get lucky throughout tournaments, but like, look at the matchups here. You know, we beat Zoroark, which should be happening, but we do well into Lucario. We beat Altaria, Blaziken, and Sceptile twice. Like, this is, you're beating basically every top meta deck in the game, which is pretty phenomenal. And again, Meowscarada can deal bench damage. Flower Trick's really cool. You choose a spot on the board, and then at the end of your next turn, or after your next turn, you deal damage to whatever Pokemon was in that spot. So it's like nothing that we have in general in Pokemon, like in Pokemon Pocket. It's a very unique attacker, but it is grass type. That's a lot of a damage, a lot of HP. With Leaf Cape, you have 190 HP with Erica's, and of course Lucky Ice Pops, and you're only at 2 prize Pokemon. Like, there's not a lot of decks in the game that are gonna want to go through double Meowscarada EXs. You know, it's just, it's a good attacker. It's a really good Pokemon. Got some high roll potential as well with the 1 energy attack cost and rare candy. So I like it. Shout out to Meowscarada. I wanted to highlight it because I think it deserves a little bit more love. And Ishan here from India, 10-1 record, first place at a pretty solidly large tournament. So very, very cool. Speaking of grass, the Breakfast Swiss Dark Alpine League is going to be Imp El Chapo, who went 7-2 playing Buzzwole. So again, like, it's grass season. Like, that's where we're at right now. Somebody literally was like, or this player, I suppose, from France was like, you know what? Like, let me just bust out the OG. Let me just bring Buzzwole out here and see if we can compete. And guess what? Like, had a pretty good run. Double Pheromosa, 1 Kartana. In fact, playing one of the non-EX Buzzwoles in here with Ground Beat, which does 40. And if your opponent has exactly 1 point, it does 80. So a very unique Pokemon, but honestly, kind of like one of those revenge attackers, right? So, you know, basically, the way that this functions is very much like Chi-Yu, where Kartana or Pheromosa goes down, then we go into Buzzwole, hit for 80, and then again, we can kind of keep the energy flowing because Lusamine in the deck list. Fragrant Forest means that we're going to be populating our bench with just a ton of basic Pokemon. Double Fragrant Forest and double Pokeball, along with double Research and Copycat, means this deck has a ton of draw, lots of thinning. Celesteela, always an incredible card. And then we have Leaf Capes and Rocky Helmets. It's a very cool deck. This is like it's like the New Age Grass Ultra Beast, which is really cool. I honestly forget when this Buzzwole card came out. It came out in Fantastical Parade. You can't tell me. You're not lying. Or you are. If anybody tells me that they knew this card existed or they thought about this card in recent times, they're lying. Like, nobody has thought about this Buzzwole card from Fantastical Parade once. But, you know, shout out to this player for kind of doing well with it. Another deck that I would love to test. You know, Buzzwole can feel kind of interesting. This is definitely something that feels like it's been power crept a bit because it does, 120 for 3. And it doesn't, like, it's not a lot of damage. Like, that's the thing. This used to be able to KO some Pokemon back in the day, but not really anymore. But it does 2 at KO. So the damage kind of lines up. I don't know. We are playing one Rocky Helmet in here. Erica Cyrus Copycat. This is a cool deck list. I wanted to highlight it because this was not something I ever expected somebody to do, but Pure Grass Ultra Beast has been buffed through some of the new cards and really interesting. Really, really interesting nonetheless. Shout out to Il Chapo. Really, really cool. Next up is going to be Niall Reynaud from the Philippines playing this Indeedee Stoutland deck, which has been seeing some play recently. So this is an interesting deck that honestly has been around for quite some time. Stoutland came out in ED Crisis, so it's been out for a very long time, but ever since Indeedee came into the metagame, it's actually been seeing quite a bit, or this deck has seen a little bit of play in certain seasons. We're playing Charon here because I believe this new Charon card works with Stoutland, and we did get a new Stoutland, but the old one is just the better one. But now Stoutland takes minus 100 damage from attacks from EX Pokemon, and that's really important. That basically means that Stoutland is an absolute unit. 140 HP, Giant Gate brings it to 160, we have Indeedee healing, and now you take minus 100 damage, at least sometimes, from attacks. So that's honestly really impressive. The Guard Dog Visage ability has always been pretty decent. This is why Stoutland has been like a fringe meta deck for a very long time now. It's honestly a deck that kind of makes sense. It's interesting. I never really thought about Charon buffing Stoutland because I just kind of forgot the Stoutland existed, but this is a deck that has been seeing play a little bit throughout the season. And here's just one example of, a player here, Neil Reynaud from the Philippines. If I'm saying the name wrong, I apologize, but they played this deck to pretty decent effect. 6-3 record, lost to Lucario, lost to Zoroark, lost to Altaria and Gourgeist. And, that's definitely going to be a bit of a downside to Stoutland, is that, it is weak to fighting. But, keep in mind, these fighting type decks like Lucario, most of the time they kind of need, like, they're going to be a turn behind because they need the extra energy, and Lucario is going to struggle with that sense. And then also, of course, Charon means that you're still going to live multiple hits. So I really don't think it's that big of a deal. Yeah, a really, really cool deck, a really cool Pokemon. Not something I've personally tested or played myself, but I have seen a couple people play it. And again, it has been buffed. We do have Charon. Or Sharon? Is that how you say it? Charon? Never known. Never known. No voice acting in the original Pokemon games. I never really watched the anime, so I don't know how to pronounce some of the the character names, quite frankly. But yeah, cool deck list. So I wanted to highlight that to you guys. What do you guys think? Again, like, a lot of these decks are certainly fine deck lists, things that have relevance in the metagame, but just not enough people are playing them. That's why they didn't make the tier list yesterday. But that's why I wanted to highlight them a bit in today's video. Give them a little bit of shine. That's what this video series is all about. Next up, at the Darkly pop-up, guess what? It is Bellibolt. You guys remember Bellibolt? Boat, Satoru Gojo, sorry, from the United States, and it's Turbo Bellibolt. You know, a deck list that I think some people just blatantly forgot about. It's sad to me because like Bellibolt was a really good card and was extremely dominant in that one season that it saw play before Manectric came out, and I think a lot of people just deferred to Manectric over Bellibolt, but Bellibolt's still a really strong card. It's one of those things where, you know, Lightning has so much going for it. Lightning and Grass really feel like they have more support than anything else in the game for whatever the reason. We've got Electric Generator, Zeraora, we got Pichu, you know, Rocky Helmet to further boost the damage. Bellibolt's really cool. Now, how do I feel about it in this metagame? I do think you're probably going to struggle a little bit with some of the fighting stuff going on, but in virtually most other things, Bellibolt's pretty unique because it's 160 HP, 2 prize Pokemon, so it's kind of difficult to go through double Bellibolt. It always has been. However, with Pichu and Zeraora, you're a little bit susceptible to bench damage and Cyrus win conditions, which, quite frankly, are somewhat common in the metagame. Pheromosa is pretty common. Hitmontop seeing some play in Lucario, so, you know, even Heatmore in some of these Fire-type decks. So that as a win condition is certainly something that Bellibolt has always been a little bit afraid of. So I think Bellibolt has a lot of potential in metagames where we're not seeing a lot of bench damage and Cyrus. You could play Poncho in the deck list, but the core concept of Bellibolt is to just park 2 Bellibolts in the active with Rocky Helmets and just attack and just hope that you can kind of outpace your opponent in the mid to late game, right? Because you have a lot of HP and you're likely not going to get one hit KO'd. There was definitely like a theory at one point to just play Lucky Ice Pops in Bellibolt, which probably also is a good idea. But yeah, I thought it was pretty cool that somebody played Bellibolt. You know, this player here, Boat, Satoru Gojo, crazy name, 7-2. So lost to Alteri Greninja and then, you know, lost to Sleep Lucario, but did beat a Sleep Lucario at some point. So, you know, a cool deck list. Another deck that unfortunately I think will just be sort of lost to the history of Pokemon Pocket. If you go back in throughout like the metagame history, even in the past like 4 or 5 months, there's a lot of really strong decks that pop up and then immediately go away because something else comes out that's really good into it, or something comes out that's just better than it, that's very similar. Like, so I think we're kind of seeing that, but honestly, Bellibolt and Manectric have both been sort of pushed out of the metagame after their 1 seasons, and it really does feel like Magnezone or Oricorio is destined to be kind of our only option for the long term for Lightning type, which, you know, is all right. But I think Bellibolt and Manectric are both really strong cards. So anyway, shout out to Bellibolt. Somebody played it. Somebody did well. Super cool. Lastly, and what I'm most excited to highlight is going to be Harian's deck from Bosnia and Herzegovina. I apologize. I don't know. I'm so bad with pronunciations. But Harian won the award, in my mind, for the coolest and smartest deck that anybody brought to our tournament this past weekend. He was playing Leafeon, Espeon, Bounded Field, anti-meta evolution deck. 6-3 was his record. He did make day 2, but lost to Sceptile in the first round. But a very, very smart deck in terms of like being able to play something that can hard counter multiple top decks in the metagame. So let's take a look at this deck list. Shout out to him. This is, again, a Leafeon Espeon, a Grass Psychic combo deck with Ogerpon and Indeedee in here, and then Bounded Field, which means that Leafeon is going to hit for double damage on all of those Grass Weak Dark-type Pokemon, and Espeon and Indeedee are going to hit for double damage on the Psychic Weak Fighting-type Pokemon in the metagame. Lots of Hydreigon, lots of Lucario, Zoroark, things like that. So really, really cool. Unfortunately, had to run into the Sceptile wall, and as we know, Sceptile is just good, so it's going to be difficult to beat Sceptile. Yeah, Bounded Field is going to double that damage. So theoretically speaking, I think there's a lot of opportunities for these evolution decks to have position in the metagame because of Bounded Field. I thought that Bounded Field would see play in a variety of different ways. It's not as common as I necessarily thought it would be, but it does make a lot of sense in these evolution deck lists because Leafeon is at least sort of the it's like the glue for these evolution decks, right? So you can play multiple different types of evolutions pretty easily in one deck list, but you have to play Leafeon. Like Leafeon is like the core of all of these like multi-energy evolution decks because Leafeon can generate its own energy, own grass energy, and it's the only deck that can really do that, or only card that can do that for evolutions. So you can play Leafeon with Flareon like we saw back in the day, or with Jolteon, which we saw back in the day, or as we see here with Espeon. You can kind of combo it with anything, and grass right now is actually one of the better offensive types in the game. I think that with the potential rise of Sceptile, we could see a Leafeon Flareon deck with Bounded Field and be strong into not only the all of the dark type decks, decks, but the grass type decks as well, and that could be really, really fun. That you might struggle then into fighting, but either way, it's a really, really unique deck list. So you could even do it with Vaporeon. You could do Leafeon, Vaporeon, and then you'd be able to hit for double damage on the fire type decks, but as we know, fire is kind of being pushed out of the minigame. But that's the advantage that these evolution decks have, is that you can kind of cover multiple types in one. This deck does have a little bit of consistency problems here. He elected to play double red because red compounds with bounded field. So like Leafeon only hits for 70, and you might be like, all right, so like double damage for 70 damage, like isn't that much? And you're not wrong, but when you play red into bounded field, it's actually going to be 90 damage times 2, which is 180 damage, which is going to want to KO a lot of Pokemon, including things like Mega Absol and Hydreigon. So it's really cool. Same with Espeon, right? If you red and then Espeon, that's 200 damage, and that's going to one-hit KO Mega Lucario. So, you know, Bounded Field doesn't solve all of the issues. These evolution Pokemon don't deal like a ton of damage, but theoretically, Bounded Field also works with Indeedee and Ogerpon, which can hit for over 100 damage pretty easily. So, a really unique deck list, a really, really fun deck. My favorite deck of our tournament this past weekend. I wish he was able to go a little bit farther, but incredibly unique. My favorite deck that anyone played this weekend. So we had to highlight it in today's video. Super, super fun. Shout out to Harian. Congrats on being featured today, but also, you know, a great run and a really, really fun deck. I would love to see more evolution bounded field decks moving forward. It's certainly something, even on the ranked ladder. Like, you got to understand, the ranked ladder coming up this season is going to be like Blaziken, Lucario, and like Hydreigon. So like being able to play Leafeon, Flareon might actually make a lot of sense, or Vaporeon or something. You know what I mean? I don't know if Sceptile will see that much play on the ranked ladder. We'll have to see. But yeah, anyway, really, really fun. Awesome decks all across the board. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and don't forget to register for PMPT number 30 this weekend. It's going to be a ton of fun. I know it's Mother's Day this weekend, but I would definitely appreciate it if you guys came and registered. Link will be down in the description below. Go check out the Discord as well, also in the description below. Anyway, there you go, guys. That's the video. Peace out. Have a good one. We'll see you guys later. And yeah. Bye.